If you didn't kill him, then who did, sir?
Who can say? Best thing for him, really. His therapy was going nowhere.
It rubs the lotion on its skin. It does this whenever it's told. Rubs the lotion on its skin, or else it gets the hose again.
Well, Clarice, have the lambs stopped screaming? The census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Quid pro quo, Doctor.
Hello, you're listening to the Literary License Podcast. Today we're discussing Silence of the Lambs. I am Keith Shago, and my co-hosts are...
Mandy Harvey.
And I'm John Wilson. Thank you for joining us.
To start us off, Mandy, why don't you tell us the reason why you like Silence of the Lambs?
Okay, so I actually originally watched this movie when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And this movie got me into kind of my step in the door for horror, besides the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And it also got me into like serial killers in general. Just, it's weird that at that age that I was like, ooh, this is great.
It's an interesting hobby at 5.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just a really good classic movie to like get yourself into like the horror genre if you're not into like slasher horror. It's one of my absolute favorite movies in the entire world. So that's why I chose it.
Nice.
So as we start discussing Silence of the Lambs, we'll give you a brief synopsis. Silence of the Lambs is basically a legendary psychological thriller. An FBI trainee, a psychopath locked up for unspeakable crimes, and a serial killer getting ever closer to his latest victim. FBI rookie Clarice Starling turns to Dr. Hannibal Lecter, monster cannibal held in a hospital for the criminally insane. For insight into the deadly madman she must find. As Dr. Lecter invites her into the darkest chambers of his mind, he forces her to confront her own childhood demons as the price of understanding, an unspeakable tuition he enacts to teach her how the monster thinks, and time is running out. So, John, what did you feel about the book, Silence of the Lambs?
Having seen the movie, but never having read the book, I was very curious on the approach that Thomas Harris made on threading the needle, so to speak, of A, the narrative overtone, and B, the themes or patterns that arose in the story. One of the things I noticed right away was sort of the usage of the word silence in the novel. I'm very proud of my OCD, so I embrace my OCD like a little precious poodle, if you will. It came in handy when I noticed it was like about 27 times that it appeared in the novel, and of course, me being me, I look up the definition of the word silence, and as a noun, it's a complete absence of sound, and as a verb, it is caused to become silent, prohibit or prevent from speaking. And I felt in the context of this book, that carries a lot of weight. There's so many there's so many interesting characters in this story which have an opportunity to not only use their voice through the narrative, both internally and externally. They almost combat the general feeling of silence that manifests itself in the prison cells, if you will, or the mortuary or the victim's bedroom. Towards the end of the book, we understand that silence means something to one particular character, Clarice. It's a kind of peace of mind or stillness from a trauma that she never really got through or overcame. I thought that was really brilliant. So I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional that Harris exemplified that throughout the novel, but I loved the book. I thought it was really great and edgy. And I felt like there was always this ticking time bomb that was kind of threaded throughout that in different ways and facets. What did you both think about that?
I actually had not read the book in a very, very, very long time, but going back to it now that I'm older, it's just one of those books that you cannot put down. For me, though, having seen the movie first before reading the book, I was kind of like interested in wondering if they would ever do like a remake and if they would revamp that, like put more things that are in the book into the movie. Like kind of like revamping it, making it more, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for?
More forensic or more? Yeah,
like just like delve into him, like delve into all of these characters a lot more.
Yeah.
Like just revamping it, seeing what they could do with it this time around.
I mean, I should warn our listeners, there's probably going to be spoilers coming up for the book and the film. So,
they all died.
Proceeding. I mean, my experience with Silence of the Lambs basically is when I first moved to England in 1987. I was living with my friend Vicky, and the first book I read was Silence of the Lambs in England and Victoria's mother, Tommy Cundler, basically handed me a copy because you have to read this book. So that was my first time, experiencing Silence of the Lambs. And then after that, of course, it's all the movie. Rereading it is quite bizarre, which I picked up a lot more this time, where Clarice, as I was speaking to John earlier, is Clarice Starling doesn't have any descriptions about her. There's not like, normally in any kind of book is like, the character's so much feet, she's got such a colored hair, she looks like this, she's built like this, and you don't have that in this book at all about Clarice Starling. You do get more with some of the other characters, but Thomas Harris is quite brilliant in the simple way that all his characters are not really described. They're more described by their personality types, not by their outward appearance or how other people react to them.
Right.
That's true. Yeah.
Which, unfortunately, rereading it because of this, I did see Jodie Foster when I was rereading the book because she's so iconic in this role.
But I wonder if you were to watch the movie first and then read the book, if you would automatically think of her regardless.
No, I mean, speaking for myself, I didn't, because I did the reverse. So I watched the movie probably 5 or 6 times, like I said. And when I was reading the book, I agree with Keith that I didn't really realize there was very few descriptors of her, because Hannibal at one point talks about her bag and her shoes and her outfit, and there's a couple. Right. I mean, we were saying how there's mention from other people of how she's either pretty or not pretty, and depending on who's evaluating her, but it's not really brought into the narrative that well, and so I feel like the movie did a great job, which we'll talk about later, the sort of comparison. They did a great job in building these characters based off of the story.
Absolutely.
I think one of the themes that really resonates throughout the book is transformation, right? It talks about transformation. So you definitely see the transformation in Clarice to the beginning and towards the end, and then Crawford and other characters, Hannibal in some ways too as well. So.
I mean, I found it, which is kind of odd because the movie's become quite iconic. But in the book, I mean, for some reason, I didn't realize that Clarice runs off with a horse, a jagged horse, that's going off to the glue factory. And this horse does get a happy ending, which is quite good. But it does, sort of thing.
Well, it's funny. A lot of them get a happy ending, whereas a movie, we'll talk about that different. It's a different sort of concept.
Yeah. But I did like Thomas Harris's approach to everything. Basically, I mean, I think Hannibal in the book works very well because you still don't know that much about him. I mean, I read Red Dragon ages ago, and you don't find that much about Hannibal Lecter.
He really is a mysterious person.
Yeah, and you only know stuff like as a second hand. He's done this and these are from other characters talking about him. It's not from the narrative.
Yeah.
Buffalo Bill's background is is very well put together.
Absolutely.
And what I did find with Buffalo Bill in the book is that he's quite pristine. Everything's very clean. Everything's very categorized.
Like OCD-ish.
Yeah, I mean, when he's in the bathroom, it's like Italian marble, and it's very clean, and and he has this relationship with his dog. It's basically his best friend. He does everything. It's his child, and
it's precious.
Yeah, but it's very emphasized in the book. His whole background story, and so in the book. You do feel something for Buff. You don't have you don't feel overly sympathetic for the character, but you do have an understanding of Buffalo Bill. They're all very much 3D characters in the book, I found.
I also think you get an internal view of these characters that you don't get with the movie, which is, Clarice is very herself put together in a way. Like, she's very meticulous and wanting to be that A+ student. And I thought that was a really interesting element in the book, as an adding a ticking time bomb, is that she's still trying to be a student, yet she's trying to build on this case and solve this case. And so you do kind of get that element of her, is being meticulous because she needs to be meticulous for her grades, for, getting the right thing and getting acceptance, which is, again, something I think that Buffalo Bill wants to try to do, is get acceptance and have that sort of air of himself to be accepted in some way in society, in that twisted mind. Clarice is trying to prove herself to the FBI and still juggle school while trying to manage this case. And so that's very interesting to me.
It's also a book about using people. I mean, Jack Crawford uses Clarice, and even though Clarice is doing all this stuff, and she's actually the one that's forwarding the case, actually getting the results that are needed. And to the simple fact that even putting her career at her training at the FBI on hold, and that basically, I mean, she's going to have to start over or, skip a semester because she's missing school. So she's not even given any allowance. And you got Hannibal using Clarice using Hannibal, Buffalo Bill, of course, using, his hump sort of thing. I also like in the book is that there is a social attraction between the governor and Hannibal Lecter when they meet. That you don't get. I mean, the thing is, they have a conversation. It's not like she's not appalled by the question. Is it like an amputee? Sucking on the tit and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really well done in the book as well. There's so many things that work so well.
Yeah.
Right.
But
I also think the temperament to Hannibal was very different from the movie, in the sense that he seemed very patient and reserved. Like, he was giving the information that Clarice wanted as long as he got something back. And so, that gets to the point of the using. As long as he got something back, he was very patient. He wasn't angry. Okay, well, let's talk about that night. What happened that night? Tell me, quid pro, what is it? pro quo.
Quid pro quo.
You know, let's
quo.
yeah, and it was like back and forth, and and it was an interesting thing where I actually thought that Buffalo Bill was more insidious in nature than I think Hannibal was, because even though he might have said a few things, he was very reserved about himself and how he positioned the pawns and moving the pawns around the board and knowing how he could manipulate without being aggressive, manipulative.
Right.
I also like in the book that what Hannibal says about Dr. Chilton. He's not a real doctor, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a private joke all the way through the book, that he's not a real doctor.
Yeah.
So, and you know, and he's like that to self. I mean, there is a lechy, horrible character within the Dr. Chilton. I mean, out of all the characters, I mean, out of Buffalo Bill, Hannibal Lecter, and everything else, you basically have Chilton is probably the most scummiest of them all.
And he wants to be used. That's the interesting thing, is like, talk about people wanting to be used. Like he kind of puts himself forward, like, what can I do and how can you use me? And she's like, yeah, I'm good. I don't need you. You can go back to your office. And he gets upset, and then he finds a way to insert himself into that world and make himself a primer. Like, okay, now I'm taking control of the situation, and now you need me. You know, and then he puts himself out there, and they really don't need him. They kind of say, fine, you manipulated us, but we're going to use other measurements to get what we want.
Well, he's pretty much just the caretaker, isn't he? I mean, he's a bit like the gardener sort of thing in any kind of estate. And another thing with Chilton is that, you know, there's not much history. I mean, the TV series, which we can cover later, basically gives him a lot more. There's a lot more history goes on between Hannibal, But just taking this at face value, it almost like Chilton, I don't know if Chilton's jealous of the fame that Hannibal wants, because at the end of the day, Chilton's very much about himself and riding off the coattails of knowing someone famous, it feels like. You know, he prides himself on having, you know, Hannibal in his prison, you know, and you know, and then he prides himself by, you know, isn't he the one that gives a news conference about Hannibal? You know, when they move him. Yeah,
celebrityism. Like, he's all about, like, oh, I'm going to be famous and popular. You know, if I give them the breaking story.
Right.
You know, so it's and to be honest, I mean, he's probably one of the most. I mean, he tortures Hannibal, really. I don't know what I mean, it doesn't really say what he does to the other prisoners in the institution, but I mean, he tortures them, you know, he's like.
Well, he tries to, but I think, again, Hannibal's so reserved, it doesn't faze him. And I think that gets his goat even more, because he wants to break this man, because he knows it's just, if I can just break him, I get something out of it. And it just shows you how twisted those types of people are, because I think that's another theme to think about in that book is friend or foe, right? You know, you have people that, again, are using each other, who is really your friend and trying to help you get what you want. And you're having to rely on technically the villain to be the one who's going to help you fix this or finish this case, right? So it's an interesting play on that, you know?
I also thought it was quite interesting that Clarice's dad isn't a cop. He's a security guard.
Oh, a security guard,
He's a security guard who just happened to be driving by, and of course his life ends, which gives another layer to Clarice, actually, because, you know, it's kind of hard not to bring up the movie sort of thing, but in the book sort of thing, you know, so basically, you know, she missed her dad, but in the book, her mother's alive. She has brothers and sisters.
I don't remember that. That's interesting, because I think that just kind of skipped over me. Yeah.
Yeah, she has. I can't remember if they were older or younger, but but her mom's still alive. And basically, after the dad died, the mom falls apart, and that's when Clarice gets sent off. And then she goes, but she doesn't go to an orphanage after the horse incident. She goes into foster care. Yeah. So, which creates a totally different character for the Clarice character than what we get later on.
Yeah.
Sort of thing, which is quite interesting. And it seems like it's almost like Hannibal and Jack Crawford provide almost a father figure to Clarice to a certain extent.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, they're giving her fatherly guidance, fatherly advice. You know, they're helping her. But though they never really come out of you never really know why Clarice was picked to interview Hannibal Lecter.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I insinuated that Crawford saw something in himself and her, and that he was also trying to deal with his losing his wife, and Bella, and how it's interesting that in that book, it's sort of those scenes is kind of like interested that they're planted throughout the book, and it's not really that much in the movie. She's not even mentioned at all in the movie. And I think Bella is another of your mortality, right? And dealing with mortality. He's getting ready to retire. So he wants to pass that legacy on to someone. And maybe it's him seeing something in Clarice that is something in him that, okay, she's got it. She's going to, and I do feel like Clarice in the book is very focused to the point to where I don't remember her crying. I don't remember her, breaking down. I remember him having to have that conversation and saying to her, don't get angry, hold your anger and use that to solve the case, use it. And she pulled it together. And there's a moment where she almost does that, but then she remembers that and she pulls herself together. So she's always learning, always adapting. So to me, it was a sign of it's something that they relate to. And that's why I feel like he picked her.
Because, she's very career focused, which is she's a very strong character. Extremely strong. But yeah, there is the lack of emotion sort of thing. The thing is even when she sees Hannibal, she doesn't. Hannibal is described in the book as quite like a lizard man, really. He's short in stature, lizardy kind of lips, very thin. He's kind of like, the way he's presented in the book is almost like he's Golem behind the cage.
Creeping,
Yeah. Tell me about that.
Tell me what Meg said to you.
and he is kind of like that character, it's like, and he's, you have this view of Hannibal, whether it's through the films or people's impression of him, and you think he's like this force to be reckoned with, but it seems like the fear in the books of Hannibal is his mental capacity. It's his, but of course, he makes Miggs swallow his tongue just by suggestion.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's Crawford even says, is it Crawford or Chilton that says, don't let it, or no, it's Crawford. He says, don't let him get into your mind. You don't want him there. Yeah. And you do what I love about novels, and it's hard to do this without doing like a voiceover narrative of knowing what's going on in the brain of the person. And so I think Lecter does it a couple times, because he does it once when he knows the truth and he kind of tells us who the killer is, because he's just so clever. They'll figure it out, but they need me to figure it out. And he's working it through his mind, but he's telling us that, this is who it is. Let's see if they're clever enough to figure it out, and that's brilliant to me as a writer, to be able to bring that sort of voice to light, the external voice. I love that.
I do have to sit there and say, though, I do kind of wonder about Hannibal's private practice when he was practicing. What was his patience like? Because
I know.
Because you have Red Dragon, and his some of his ex-patients show up, and they're and then you got Silence of the Lambs now, and he's got Raspel, isn't it? Raspel, and that's one of his patients, which basically is tied into Buffalo Bill, as we later find out, or Jane Gum, because there's this whole history of them looking for this Norwegian sailor, about getting more information about him, the person found in there, and you just think, God, what is Hannibal's? What was his clientele like?
I know. Well, in a way, like you were talking about using people and being a user, he was a succubus. He fed on people's fear. He fed on their concern and troubles. And I think they do translate that well in the movie, but it's like one of those things where you see that it's a tit for tat, right? He literally is like, you give me that fear, I'll give you something back, and he just feeds off of that energy. Right. So that's what he was manipulating these patients who are just so jaded and jacked up, and he just, oh, great, tell me more, here, I got to record this. Hold on.
It's also quite amazing that out of this, out of these series of books, it's Hannibal that actually rises to be the star later
Yeah,
on. If you look at they're a quadrilogy, isn't it? There's the 4 books. But Red Dragon, he serves a purpose. Thomas Harris's Red Dragon. It's very interesting, but Hannibal's kind of there. It's very rough around the edges, and in Silence of the Lambs is where Thomas Harris basically pulls it together and gets rid of the rough edges, and this is like the masterpiece later on. Then,
right.
And because I remember when I read the book the first time, Hannibal didn't really have. I read it. It was these interesting and stuff like this, but it was like Clarice Starling all the way. It's her story.
Yeah.
And now rereading it, due to the films and what Hannibal has become over, since the book was written. Now it's kind of like Hannibal comes out a lot more. It's kind of bizarre reading this time that Hannibal's actually, you take more focus on Hannibal, but you don't really pay that much attention to him. I don't think the first time I read the book.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree on
that. Thomas Harris, there's a documentary on YouTube that we'll link up to our webpage that talks about the history of Silence of the Lambs. And I think Thomas Harris is probably one of the first novelists who actually started writing about criminal behavioral studies and stuff like this, and using the FBI and this way of like going into looking at crime and how the serial killer thinks. And, and because of the Silence of the Lambs and the series of books, it's kickstarted a lot of different writers now. There's so many writers now, the Norwegian Joe Nesbo, which we discussed last episode with The Snowman coming out. You can see Thomas Harris's, template there. Yeah. And there's Patricia, who's the other writer who writes about a crime? She wrote The Alchemist.
Oh gosh, I forget her last name. Patricia, yes.
I got no clue.
Hold on.
I'm a terrible human being.
But Cromwell, Patricia Cromwell.
Oh, there you go.
Now Patricia Cromwell, I would sit there and say she can thank her whole career on Thomas Harris breaking open that wall there.
Yeah.
You have the James Patterson books, Along Comes the Spider, and which they made movies out of, and all those sort. He has a whole career. Now every crime book that you read now delves pretty much into finding the serial killer, and and I just remember books before this period where, the killer came, kill people. There's no real reason why they did it, and like Richard Lehman books. They would torture the women, and basically it's just violence, violence, violence. Good cop finds the person. Plain story. Yeah. Why the killer did it? You'll never know, but it's not important. The important thing is they caught them.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I mentioned to you saying, Keith, that like one of the writers I like, John Fowles, who did The Collector, it's sort of like, to me, it's a preset to this because it doesn't get into, like, Harris does this amazing job bringing in the forensics to it, to where you become part of the investigation. Like, I felt like even though I'd watched the movie and I knew the outcome to it, I felt like, wait, how is she going to figure this out? Is she going to figure this out? Like, is she going to figure this out the same way I'm going to figure this out? And like, I was trying to piece it together with Clarice and trying to be like, wait, how is she going to exactly figure this out and piece together the puzzle,
Right.
I think that, I kind of, so before I saw this documentary on YouTube, which again, we will, put the link onto our website, but it was quite interesting because there's this woman on there and she's discussing, Thomas Harris coming to the FBI, and then, they're diving into all these serial killers and Buffalo Bill, which we did a blog of earlier, is Buffalo Bill is basically an amalgamation of different serial killers, actual serial killers. And you can see like the different aspects of the serial killer that they put into the Buffalo Bill character. But this woman, when she's speaking, I'm kind of wondering, like, was she Clarice? Because it's like, she was the first female that she solved the Green River Killer, and they couldn't get anything out of him. And then what they decided to do is, they said, oh, you cannot, have a career here. And after 3 years, she got a career there. She went to the top of her game, a bit like Clarice from training. She interviewed the Green River Killer, who wasn't giving anyone everything, but they found out that females speaking to serial killers were a lot more open to the female, even though they would butcher and kill these females. But they liked both the female about their crimes and stuff like this. And so the Green River Killer she went to interview him, because that's what they would do. They were building up their profiling at that time on different, and the female would go in, can't remember the woman's name, and she would get all this information that none of her male counterparts were able to get from the serial killer. And it's quite an interesting documentary because you can actually see the Clarice characters. Like, this is pretty much what happens in this book. What Thomas Harris is pretty much documented, that, you know, they send a female in to speak to Hannibal Lecter, who Hannibal Lecter's never given any information whatsoever to anyone, and all of a sudden he opens up to her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so
that's really interesting.
So it's quite interesting there.
Amazon is here to make your life easier. By just the tap of a button, you can turn the camera on your phone to your own personal shopping list. Introducing Flow. Just tap the camera icon onto the search bar and you can find whatever it is you're looking for, right on Amazon. Faster than scanning a barcode and typing the name of your item into the search engine. Besides, searching with words is so 2012. Save time and money. Amazon, where shopping meets effortless.
You spook easily, Starling?
Not yet, sir.
He's past the others. The last cell. I'll be watching. You'll do fine.
A killer is on the loose.
Keeps them alive for 3 days. Then he shoots them, skins them, and dumps them.
A rookie FBI agent is on his trail.
He's got real physical strength, cautious, precise, and he's never impulsive. He'll never stop.
But in order to track him down, she'll have to match wits.
I'll help you catch him, Clary.
Believe me, you don't want Hannibal Lecter inside your head.
With the darkest of all minds.
Just do your job, but never forget what he is.
Oh, he's a monster. Pure psychopath. So rare to capture one alive.
So close to the way you're going to catch him. Do you realize that? Oh, Clarice, your problem is you need to get more fun out of life.
You told me you don't spook easily.
You call this easy, sir?
Lecter's missing and armed.
Man's a raving maniac. Who knows what he'll do?
Thank you, Clary. Thank you.
Welcome back. As we discussed Silence of the Lambs, the film, John, take it away.
Yeah, so I've seen Silence of the Lambs a lot of times, probably 5, 6, 7 times. There's these moments in the movies that I think when I first saw it was very shocking and terrifying. You know, obviously, Buffalo Bill is played by Ted Levine, who, by the way, is going to be in Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom next year, so be on the lookout for him there. Is, to me, more three-dimensional and wicked in the film than, dare I say, even Hannibal. But it's difficult to condense a novel down like this into a screenplay. But I think the screenwriter, Ted Talley, who won an Academy Award for this movie, did an amazing job being able to extract the right elements from the novel. One of the key components that I loved about the film, which I talked about earlier, was feeling like I was actually part of the FBI investigation. And there's a mystery that's unfolding, and I feel like having it be a part of it is like really kind of cool for me. Like that was just one of the elements that I really, really loved about the movie. What about both of you? What did you think about that?
I found, I saw the movie when it first appeared. I remember going to the opening weekend of it in the West End, and I was blown away by it. I mean, it was quite a few years since I read the book and then saw the movie. And at that time, I thought, God, this is so close to the book, you know? And I thought that everyone's performance is fantastic. The only person I always had a problem with was Anthony Hopkins. I always think he chews the scenery a bit too much sometimes. I know that this is the role that pretty much made him, it gave him his career back. You know, and if you ever seen the movie Magic, with him being the ventriloquist who's murdering people, which is a classic film from the early 80s. This is like an extension of that. character for him.
I've never seen that. I'm actually writing that down because that
I
sounds
know, yeah. I'm
kind of
not going to
crazy.
look that up.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of puppets, but hey, like I'll give it a shot.
I don't do puppets or clowns, so
Yeah.
Well, Magic's really good. I mean, it was Anthony Hopkins and Anne Margaret is in it as well.
Nice.
And it's a really interesting film. It really stands the test of time. But when you look at that character in Magic, this is kind of an extension when he plays Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do like Anthony Hopkins. I think he's a really good actor. And I do think that my view watching the film this time around is a bit jaded by the Hannibal TV series, because I think the actor playing Hannibal at the moment in the TV series does it so much better than Anthony Hopkins. It's all underlined. And I saw Manhunter before Silence of the Lambs when that came out, and I thought Brian Cox was fantastic as Hannibal Lecter, because it wasn't overt and in your face. Everything was under it. And Anthony Hopkins is there. It's in your face sort of thing. But I mean, Silence of the Lambs still holds up. It's still a brilliant film. I think it's probably one of Jodie Foster's finest films.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that as well.
I didn't like how they kind of, like I mentioned this before, made her a little bit like naive at some points, and because again I personally resonated more with Clarice in the book than I did the film, because they made her I feel like here's some of the weird elements that I noticed that were different from the book versus the film. The fact that men were constantly oogling her, it was so avert that I guess I didn't notice it before, but now having read the book and then watching the film, I'm like, what the hell? Like there's chance with these guys run by her and she's running and they all turn and look at her. When she's in the elevator, they're all surrounded by her. When she's in the mortuary, they're all surrounded by her, and it's sort of this weird thing, but that the presence of them still affected her. Whereas I felt like in the book, it wasn't. There were the men that were in the mortuary with her, and she was commanding, right? Get out of the room.
Right.
Got work to do. And she even says how Crawford is just in awe with how she handled that situation. And she, and it does translate in the movie that way, but I definitely feel like she's affected by people, and she doesn't like that when people have an opinion of her, it affects her that way. Whereas in the book, I feel like she doesn't give a shit. Like she's just like, you don't like me, I don't care. I'm doing my job. Oh well.
I'm doing my job, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And even Hannibal, it comes across in the movie as angry and like loony. Like at times he's like, the weird scene is like, I kind of had to go back and read it in the book, is when she's leaving. In the movie, it's like he yells and screams, come back, right. And she runs up, and again, you're not supposed to be by the glass, but she's right up on the glass, and she's like, what, tell me now. It's this urgency, like forced urgency. Like, we got to move the story. Come on, and he's so loony and like,
I also think like deep down with her, she realized that he would not hurt her. So her running up to the glass, it wouldn't have, mattered to her. He wasn't going to do anything to her. And
but I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because I feel like, how would she know that? In the book, yes, because in the book, she builds a relationship. And so I feel like at one point, even when he grazes her finger towards the end and he hands her the file, she's not like clenching. She trusts him.
She's
like,
not
okay.
scared.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's also the scene where after she goes to the garage, and then she's sitting. I mean, she's sitting, with her legs crossed, on the floor right next to the glass.
Yeah.
Right.
After that, and you're thinking, well, you're given these set of rules.
Yeah. I don't care.
Rules.
If he eats my face, that's fine.
One thing I thought was also really interesting too was like the fact that they built in the funeral scene with the dad. I thought that was really smart, because that wasn't in the book, and I was like, what's going on? And I completely forgot that scene. But like when they part the doors and she's going back in her memory of her father, and I felt like that was a really interesting way to incorporate that trauma to her, and how it pulls her back. They're like, hey, focus, we're here to do an autopsy, and she's like, oh yeah, wait, I'm here.
But I mean, I think another reason why Clarice in the film has to have a little bit more emotions and everything like this is because the viewer has to be put in their place into Clarice's shoes.
Exactly.
And so, so the normal person, whether it's seeing the picture of the face being chewed off by the nurse that Chilton shows her before he goes in, or being, or the intimidation that she feels as she's walking towards Hannibal's cell, and the multiple reasons throughout the film. I think
She carries herself very well, though.
Yeah, but I think it's also so that you as the viewer are putting yourself into her shoes. And so therefore it's like, though Clarice in the book wouldn't have those kind of emotions, but in the film you need those emotions, because otherwise, excuse my language here, but it would come across like Clarice Starling is a cold bitch in the film. Yeah. And I think that you have to kind of...
Definitely something that people probably feel at first. When they first meet her character, they're probably like, wow, this lady's a fucking bitch, but she's really not.
I also felt like they took some of those pressure points away from the movie. Was like, there were pressure points, like it moved along very fast paced. It gave a lot of clues quickly and put it together quickly for you. So that, and again, you have to, because obviously a book is, I don't know, I forget how many pages this book is, but it's hard to condense and put all that in there. But, the pressure point of her not being really focused on school, that wasn't really important. She was like, hey, you need me for a job? Great. I'll go out here and I'll do that. Whereas in the book, it was constantly a ticking time bomb and a balancing act of, okay, I got to focus on my classes. Don't forget you have your midterm, or not your midterm, but your term exam here on this day. And you got to do this. You got to shoot the shooting range and get how many score. Like, that was a constant ticking time bomb, as well as the poor senator's daughter. That was that constant ticking time bomb. I felt it was such a longer duration in the book versus in the movie. It felt like she just was kidnapped and she was just saved.
Yeah. Well, there are quite a few things, as far as that are missing. Sometimes there's some things in the book that, as far as Clarice's character, which I kind of wish they would have spent like maybe another minute or two in the film. The point where she goes in the book, when she goes into the garage, and then she comes out and the reporters are there and the police are there, and she commands that and she holds it. Yeah. This is a trainee, and and to be honest, that scene would, if that was put in the film, is actually a lot more impressive than the funeral scene that comes up later on with, the mortuary scene, because she was holding it. And it's like, and that's probably in the book at the one time you realize that Clarice, she's unsure how to handle it, but she handles it. And it's the first time in the book that you get that. And then, of course, with that scene missing, and then you have the mortuary scene, then what you do get, unfortunately, is when she does command, go, we need to take care of her now, you need to all go away. And the thing is, they don't move right away. They look at each other, and then they do that. This girl? Yeah. And then she says it again, then she says again, can you just move along now, move along? And then they're going, oh, well, whatever, sort of thing. And they kind of go away hesitantly. It's not like they went away like, oh, we respect you. They went away hesitantly, which I think is what they did with, probably taking that scene from the book, for the garage scene, and probably incorporated into the, the same thing into the mortuary sequence. So
that would have made a lot of sense.
But I did think in the book the garage scene was a lot more effective than what you see in the film. I thought that was well done in the film, but the book, it was slightly better handled that way.
Yeah. And I also think that one of the other scenes with Buffalo Bill, like, I think in that movie, I don't know why he resonated more with me than Hannibal, because obviously you knew there was a legacy of what he's done as well, but there was just something about that character and how he held himself, and the fact that he does in the book and calls the senator's daughter Catherine, right? Catherine,
yes,
calls her it, and constantly calling her it, like she's an object. And then how Keith, you mentioned this earlier in the book, how how tortured he is because you get some of his history and his past, but in the movie you still feel that. For some reason, I've still felt that weight of him trying to be something, trying to transform himself, and trying to get this unobtainable thing for himself, and it just carrying through in those scenes with him. And I definitely just felt even to this day in the modern world and how we've seen a lot of different films, that character still resonates the same way and still twisted and warped, in his mind.
I wish the movie showed more about him, like more.
Yeah. I wanted more of it.
About the character, you know what I mean? Like why he does the things he does. Just get into his mind, show the viewers why he's doing what he's doing, not just being like, well, he does this because he wants this, blah blah blah.
But I think the film deals mainly in black and white, though. It's a very black and white film. You have your villain, you have your good people, and there's no areas of gray with any of them. And the sort of, and repeat viewing, you start shading things in with more gray going on. The Jack Crawford character. There's no. In the book, Jack Crawford is kind of a tortured character, and there is a history with Hannibal that's not really explained in Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
In the movie, but it's mentioned a little bit more in the book. And you also have Jack Crawford's wife who's dying, which is not mentioned at all in the film.
Yeah.
So he's dealing with all this at the same time. Plus, what's missing in the film, which is kind of a shame, is Jack Crawford's relationship with his chauffeur. And Jack Crawford, he's got, the chauffeur taking Clarice. My chauffeur will take you. And the chauffeur is kind of like the buffer between Jack Crawford and Clarice in the book,
right,
which you don't really get in the film. There's just like Clarice is on her own, and there's not that. And then, and then Jack Crawford, I sit there and say in the film, it's more of a father figure. There is that kind of father figure situation going on. And especially like you do get the scene at the end where, he's at her graduation. Which is kind of, in the book, she doesn't graduate. She just goes back to school, doesn't she?
She ends up, it's a very different ending because you have, the movie is typical, I hate to say it's like typical Hollywood theatrics, which is cliffhanger, right?
Right.
He calls her and, hey, I'm going to go have dinner. I'm going to have a dinner with a friend, right? Or dinner.
Yeah. I'm going to have dinner with a friend. And then you see Chilton walking off into the distance.
Yeah. And then you have that where she's like, Dr. Hannibal, like whatever, Dr. Lecter. But in the book, it's interesting because it's all done through letters and read, and there's different segments of that, in the conversations that are being had. So she's, I think in the book, if I remember, she's like laying on a bed with someone and nuzzled under, and she's silently sleeping and she's peaceful. In the movie, she's not peaceful. She's like, oh shit, gotta go back out there now. Oh god,
let's do it again.
Here we go again.
Well, the thing is, she just graduates. What I thought was good about the book is that, she just goes back to her classes. It's almost like it's just another case. That's it.
Right.
It's just a case.
And she's exhausted too.
Routine.
Yeah, and in the book she's exhausted and she just really wants to just have that space. So I think she even spends time with her roommate and they just kind of like crack a cold one open. I forget. It was like they have a Coke and some Jack and they're just like, can you believe this just happened? Yeah, it's kind of, okay, well, class is on Monday. Okay.
I'll help you get out. That's what's quite good about the flatmate is that I'll help you study. I got everything ready for you. We'll just crack the books. Don't worry. We'll get you back on track. Yeah. And I quite like that in the book. Which the movie. Right. But then again, you don't really have you don't have that subplot in the movie at all about the whole schooling thing.
Just why I really want someone to like take the like a revamping it or reimagining it, whatever. Just take that under the helm and add things from the book that should have been in the movie to make the characters seem like.
They actually could make this a two-parter if they wanted to.
Absolutely.
And make it more rise up to where he comes and gets her and captures Catherine, and then it's like, oh god, what are we going to do next? And then the second chapter of that,
Well, the interesting thing that you say that is that Hannibal, the TV series, as you know, was canceled by NBC, but now Brian Fuller and team are bringing it back, and Clarice Starling will be in the fourth season.
Wow. So it's caught up. So I've never watched the series, so it's actually caught up because I thought it was like a younger kid. Like I thought it was a younger version of him, and then
No, it's not at all. Basically, Hannibal starts off with the relationship between him and Will Graham from Red Dragon. And basically, it's all about the Chesapeake Killer thing. And basically, they mentioned Chesapeake Killer in Silence of the Lambs, but it's basically that case. And Will Graham has a relationship with Hannibal Lecter on an intellectual level. And it shows how Hannibal gets inside the brains of everyone.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Which is really nice because actually the way they make Hannibal in that series is awesome. Because it really, really gets into his head why he does what he does, why he's doing what he's doing, and all that stuff. Like this show is actually really good.
I think it's interesting. His character is interesting because he cannibalizes and does that, but I think there's a boredom to that after a while, and he realizes he gets he feeds off of something more. Sorry, the pun intended. He feeds off of the fear or the just torturedness of other people, and being able to manipulate that and make them do what he wants them to, and that's sets something at deeper.
I think too, further in the series, or if they made more movies or whatever, he would actually become much more evil because, like you said, he gets bored. He's probably going to get bored. It's the same thing every time for him. He's probably going to think of different ways to do his killings or whatever else, and it probably could be. Like he could become more evil, and he could become more interesting.
Well, another thing is Hannibal didn't perfectly eat his whole victims. Basically, he would display his victims and take body parts, and then he'd take the body parts and then hold dinner parties where everyone would eat that body part.
The displays that he did, though, I mean, especially in the show, the displays that the show showed were amazing, like phenomenally made. If you haven't seen this show, you need to see it.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it because I just think it's very interesting. I mean, the show sounds very interesting. Awesome. One of the things I wanted to mention was the screenwriter Ted Talley, who again, he won a best screenplay for Silence. He also did Red Dragon, but he refused to do the movie Hannibal, and quoted by Inside Film Online saying, "For a lot of reasons, I didn't like the book. The director, Jonathan, is it Demme, and I read it, and we were horrified." So they liked the Red Dragon, but they refused to kind of work on Hannibal because of the direction of where that book went. They actually worked really well with the author. They just disagreed with him on that particular book, and didn't want to do it.
I mean, I read Hannibal when it came out, and I've seen the movie, of course. The trouble with Hannibal is that once Hannibal's out and about, and I don't know. I mean, the thing is that, he had a great character in Will Graham, who basically Hannibal ruins him, sort of thing. So that's the reason why Clarice comes into Silence of the Lambs. Right. And then Hannibal, it takes place, I think, maybe 5 years after the fact, and Hannibal's out, and then you have like this weird story about him and Clarice, and they have a love affair, and it's twisted.
It's really twisted. It's meant to be very twisted in mind. Yeah.
And I think with Thomas Harris, I think what happened and I do think he was very heavily influenced by the success of the film Silence of the Lambs. I mean, I don't, this is my own, I haven't talked to Thomas Harris. I haven't read interviews on him, but, I'm surmising that basically, he fell in love with the Hannibal character. The Hannibal character was going to make him lots of money, and he wrote Hannibal. And I do think that, and then Hannibal Rising, of course, comes out after that, which is the prequel to everything. Right. And I do think that, I think he got lost in the whole Hannibal story. And I think that, because everyone found the Hannibal and Silence of the Lambs, the movie, a character, and he's, enthralled. But, at the same time, Hannibal in the film, I mean, he's probably only in it about 20 minutes, maybe at the most, if you, put all the scenes together.
Yeah.
And then, when you got someone in it for that much, it's a bit like taking a minor character that you love, like in a TV series, and spinning them off in their own series, and a lot of times that series doesn't work. Sometimes I think that's probably where Hannibal suffered for me personally.
Yeah. I think some of the other characters that I would want to mention from the movie to the book, I liked Barney in the book. In the movie, I felt like, come on, you should have used him more. And he was like basically like Lecter's little caretaker confidant, who took care of him. And then Miggs, we didn't mention Miggs. Miggs was like a little small character that was, tortured starling, which by the way in the movie was disgusting, and she walked out like nothing. It's kind of like we'll go back to Planet of the Apes. She still had flawless hair, flawless skin. She's like, hey, no, didn't bother me. She goes to her car.
It's like the precursor to Something About Mary. What's this hair gel?
And I have to say, the sad thing is, she comes out, and the first memory she has of her father, there's something wrong there. Daddy.
I mean, that's another interesting thing about the film versus the book, as well, is that Clarice's dad he's a night watchman. He's not a policeman at all. He's a night watchman.
Right.
And of course, they turned him into
a sheriff, right?
A sheriff. Yeah, he's a sheriff of this small town. I mean, the circumstances of him dying are the same. It's basically he walked in on this, store being robbed. I think in the movie they imply that he walked through the front door. In the book, he catches them as they're leaving the back door, don't they? So I mean, that's the slight difference there, but which I guess it creates a whole different dynamic as far as Clarice is. And it's quite funny, but in the film, Clarice runs off with the sheep, and she's carrying the sheep 2 miles down the road.
But see, I feel like that made more sense in the horse, because then it's like you're trying to save the thing that's being killed. Oh, well, I guess it's the same thing, yeah. But it's that haunting thing, the Silence of the Lambs, that thing.
Well, that's what I think. I think in the book, the thing is, I can't remember if they're killing the newborn lambs in the book, because they're killing the horses. And then she finds this horse. Is that she runs off with the horse, and then when she goes to the foster home that she goes in the book, she takes that horse with her, because later on, as you know, she gets a letter that the horse finally died. But the horse
is the lambs because she where she knows something's wrong is when there's no crying, or there's crying and then she hears nothing, and there's something like that.
Silence.
Right? It's a silence. It's like, oh my god, and then all she can hear is when she sleeps is a crying. The lambs.
She
crying.
realizes,
Yeah.
So, and I know that in the book, the film, it's all about the lambs, but it's quite funny because, like, when you're reading the book, it's all about the horse, and it's a nice story.
The one thing I didn't get about the whole with the book was her finding Clarice finding the acid, the drugs in the one girl's place, and then the daughter finding the nudie photos of the daughter, and it was like, was it meant to make these women seem like they're more risque or something? And because that was one thing
more of like a random filler, like they were trying to they wanted to segue into something, but they needed to fill like a couple pages with just something, just to, because it didn't make sense to me either.
Yeah, because I was like, where are they going with this? I didn't get that, because I thought, she's going to find this, and then maybe one of the other girls is going to have that too, and maybe they both got the drugs from the same guy, or it was just weird.
Well, I think that I think that maybe the reason in the book, I think the reason why you have the scene where Clarice goes to Catherine's flat and finds the pictures, I think it's to actually give her a scene with Catherine's mother, because there's no interface between Clarice and Catherine's mother in the book. In the movie, and I think
in the movie, it's interesting because they flipped it. So it was actually the first victim's the woman who had the pictures. So the first show, and it's like, I guess it's to insinuate that her and Bill or James was intimate in some ways, because someone's taking these pictures and she's like, here, take it here, and I guess she was in the movie too, she was the third victim, she was the first victim, but she was found third, but in the book she was the second victim found. Yes, it's noticed that too, is interesting.
And in the book, I mean, the first victim does not have a relationship with Buffalo Bill, really. I mean, the thing, because you have they did this is, you kind of have the same scene in the film with the first victim's friend.
Oh yeah.
I mean, one's working, in the film she's working as a social jerk, or I'm not quite sure, but in some kind of restaurant somewhere. And the other one, she's working in an insurance agency. Yeah. And you get a little bit more telling that, the first victim didn't have a boyfriend. If she had a boyfriend, she'd know about it. They and she was made fun of. Her friend goes, we made fun of her. She was fat. She was this, she was that. And they're quite horrible for her. But we felt bad when she died. It's like, and it was kind of like that. And of course you don't really get that. You kind of get the sense of it in the film, but you don't get the whole picture.
And I remember also the dad being really more aggressive in the book than in the film, because the dad you could see he's still mourning, and he's like, my daughter's room's up there, so if you want to go, everything's the same way. Whereas in the book, he's just like, who are you? Who the fuck are you? He just kind of like, why are you here? And then she would say something, and he'd be like, what do you mean by that? And he would take everything she was saying personally, and he'd be like, go up to the room, but don't mess anything up, and like,
Well, another thing is the dad is remarried, doesn't he? He has a baby in the book.
A younger woman too.
Younger.
Yeah. Because one of the things he snaps to her is like, what, you think this is my first wife? I mean, he's like kind of mocks her, and she's no, it's not what I thought,
And then when you go, which is, it's kind of a bizarre mechanic in the book, because she's, he gets remarried from the point of the second. You don't quite know how many years have gone on, because we don't really know how frequent Buffalo Bill kills. Unlike Red Dragon, the Tooth Fairy or Dollahide kills on the full moon, it seems to be. In this book, in the Silence of the Lambs, you're not really quite sure how long these 5 victims have been going on for. I mean, it could have been 3-4 years. We're not quite sure. Yeah. But let's give it like 3 years. Let's just throw a number out there. And then the father gets remarried, and then he has his new wife there, who's now had a baby, but yet they keep her room untouched.
Yeah.
Which must be kind of weird for the new wife.
Yeah. I think it was a matter of days, because I feel like, well, it doesn't say this in the movie, but in the book, there's something about the days and them figuring out. I don't remember how they figured it out forensically wise. They said, well, it's a matter of these many days, because remember, it becomes like a 48 to 72 hour window.
Yeah, because the
said, okay, if we don't do something now, if we don't do something by now, then we know. No, but so you get it on both sides. You get it on Buffalo's side, where Buffalo Bill says, oh, well, and that in itself is so disturbing, how he again is treating this woman like an object, and like, well, so the skin loses its density, and he's breaking down like, oh, well, I gotta harvest. I gotta harvest the hide at a certain point, and you're just like, oh,
You're really
whereas
like, what the
forensically, I forget how they figured it out. It was like a close window. So I would say these women die within months of each other.
Yeah. It depends how long it takes them to sew an outfit together, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
But I mean, you do have the, I think that what's quite good, in the film and the book, I do think that, if you're going to be a murderer sort of thing, you're not going to humanize. You're like a farmer, and your cows or your sheep, and you basically, you don't name your chicken. I remember an ex of mine, basically when he went to India for the first time, and he's, gone up, his grandparents on the farm, and it's like, he takes him out to the chicken coop, and he's like, what chicken do you want to have? And, and Mandy points the chicken lovingly. I think I don't know what name he gave, but he gave it some name. And the grandfather picks up the chicken and cuts off its head. Because this is dinner sort of thing. And then the next one was like, and he goes, what other chicken do you like? And he went, obviously, hopefully he was quite young, or he was a bit simple. I'm not quite sure what. But, he pointed the next one, and again, how off comes the head? And, and then that night at dinner, voila, here's your chicken.
Here's Fred.
Pretty much so.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because they do bring that up, and I can't remember if it's in the book and in the film, but they do bring it up of Hannibal asking Clarice, did you name it? And she, oh, yes, I did. And then him not being able to name, and then having, like, for instance, the Senator Ruth Martin, when she's doing the whole press thing, and she's saying, please don't hurt Catherine. She's my daughter. You're a good person. I love my daughter, Catherine. And they're them just going, wow, she's really smart, because she's basically humanizing this thing to him, and what does she say? And if he thinks she's human, he won't slaughter it. And you're just like, oh,
yeah. Rude awakening.
Yeah.
And little did you know that Jamie Gumb, I don't think, had a television set, so it was all wasted.
Yeah. Exactly. He's old school.
I mean, I do have to sit there and say with Buffalo Bill, I think the actor playing him, Ted Levine, was fantastic. Nothing to take away from his. I do think that in the film they did turn him into kind of a dirty character. He had like dirt underneath his fingernails. His house was, all that. When she walks in that kitchen, there's like garbage everywhere.
Yeah, it was a hoarder house. Like you're just like, hoarder.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah, and I don't know if they did that basically because, personally, I think that if he was very clean and very tidy, and she walked in, and because in the book, basically, they don't really give a description of the house except outside, the bathrooms, Italian marble, and blah blah blah. Yeah. But in the book, basically, it's like she knows it's him because the moth comes and doesn't land on him.
No, it crawls out from behind his, which I would have wished they would have done that. Crawls out from underneath his robe, and she's like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
And in this case, it's like I think it just flies off onto a table or something. I can't quite remember. I saw the film yesterday, so I can't remember it.
And I actually like that in the book that there's a mention as to why she can't shoot him. Because if you're watching the film, he kind of gets away and she has a moment to shoot him and she doesn't. And in the book, it says it's her explaining, okay, Clarice, be smart. You got to do this. You got to do, okay, get the phone. No, wait, look at, and she's like analyzing the situation. And she basically says she can't shoot him until he draws a weapon. Yeah. Because like by law, I guess you can't like to do that in a person's home, whatever. She kind of breaks it down and he gets away and it's like, shit, and now I got to go get him, Yeah. So. Yeah.
Well, I also think that isn't in the book, isn't it at that point before she finds him, doesn't it also comes out with Buffalo Bill's backstory a little bit that he murdered his grandparents. Yeah. And then he was institutionalized. Yeah. And then he got out.
If I want to remember, it's through Lecter's tapes or his logs, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So by the time she's face to face with him and knows about it, she knows a bit more about his back history. Of course, that's all wiped underneath the carpet when it comes to the actual film version of it. So basically, it's just her trying to get a grip on her gun. But another thing is, in the book, Clarice also is very good with her gun. It's like, oh, you need to shoot it 10 times, and and then her gun instructor is very, very, gives her some, words of wisdom about handling your gun, and this is how you have to practice. Make sure you practice every day, and where of course you don't in the film you do not get the instructors guiding Clarice along the way that you get in the book.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And it seems like it seems like another thing is that there's some weird imagery things going on in Silence of the Lambs as well. The thing is like when she in the beginning of the movie where she's jogging along and they come and go, your Crawford wants to see you, and she goes running, and she runs by a sign that says pain, anger, and all the things, right. And then and a very bleached out sign says pride. Little things like that.
And it's funny because when I saw that in the film, I don't know why I thought of that 7 Deadly Sins, because the way it was kind of panning down, I was like, oh, and then I was like, is this sort of like a motivator for them? I didn't.
And I did find that, the interesting thing about the film as well is that it started a whole craze. You wouldn't have the X-Files without Silence of the Lambs, because, let's face it, Gillian Anderson's character, Scully, is basically Clarice Starling in the X-Files.
Yeah, that's true.
And you also have that brown film stock that they used in Silence of the Lambs, which basically was what they used for like X-Files and other films that came out after that, that you found that brown stock.
Silence of the Lambs definitely sparked a lot of new productions for different views for shows, movies, stuff like that.
Yeah,
well, you also look in that. If you look in the air, that year, Cape Fear came out. Deception came out. There's a lot of movies that came out that were like that mystery thriller, that
was like
era.
The new thing to go see is let's see how mysterious and what we can do with this to make it the new Sounds of the Lambs.
Yeah, one of my favorite movies is Shattered. I don't know if either of you've ever seen it. It's actually a really weird, twisty, bendy thing, but it's definitely check it out. It's really
I'll put that on my list.
Mindfuck.
I think that without Silence of the Lambs, you would have the whole CSI phenomena.
Oh yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's true.
CSI,
Law and Order,
Law and Order, Criminal Minds is really
Criminal
good
Minds. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the film still stands out to the test of time. I mean, it'd be, yeah. And, it is in the world before mobile phones as well, which is quite interesting. It's like...
It's a really good classic movie to jump into. Just to lose yourself for a couple hours with that movie. It's great. I love it.
It's also the pacing's so good in it because it keeps you constantly engaged. Like, what's going on now? What's going here? And she's constantly hopping
never a dull
around.
moment in that movie at all. There's nothing that's going to be like, okay, I want to turn this off.
Yeah,
you're going to want to sit through that whole entire thing and then research and see what else you can come up with. To watch and read.
Well, it's a very methodical movie. Everything's done very methodically. I mean, Clarice is, from the beginning, every clue that's done is very methodically put together. The whole movie's very methodical. There's a method to everything that happens.
Right.
Yeah. It's very, you go, step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4 to step 5. It doesn't really jump back and forth.
Especially with Hannibal escaping, that whole, it sets it up when I actually like that because I don't think in the book it sets it up that how he got the pen, because it's believed, or people believe it's Clarice's fault because she's just incompetent. She must have left something behind, and that's how he gets out. But it's Chillington, and you're just kind of going, okay, this is kind of rewarding that he's so arrogant and cocky that he leaves his pen behind, and that ultimately point A leads to point B to where he gets out, gets the handcuff. And that scene actually I actually love that scene because how he gets out is painted just like the novel. And I love that.
And also when he gets out too, he doesn't give a shit. He doesn't care that he's out walking around. He just literally blends in with everybody else that's around him.
Yeah.
He's not worried that someone's going to find him. He just goes about and does his thing.
The one thing I just realized I remember too was I actually wish they would have done this like what they did in the film and the book, which was when the FBI is going to the one house to break in, and Clarice is over here trying to figure something out over here and try to figure out, and then she kind of figures out that's the house. I kind of in the movie the buzzer goes off and it's this weird sort of I don't know who in the hell has a doorbell like that in their basement that fires off like that, in some time, but it's like electric and fire. And he looks up and he's like, "What's going on?" And you don't know. You think it's the FBI because it's the guy at the door and he's ringing with the box of roses and stuff. Right. And then lo and behold, the door opens and it's Clarice. I actually kind of wish in the book it was wrote the same way, chapter by chapter. It would have
a really, really good part.
That would have been interesting.
I also thought it was quite interesting was Lecter's uncanny ability is sixth sense.
Yeah. The
your
smell.
Your bleeding has stopped. It's like
it's
nothing, it's just a scratch. It's like he knows that
and I feel like in the book too he gave some really rare cream and perfume that
you use Evian skin cream and sometimes you wear L'Oreal du Tube, but not today. It's like, okay.
How did you know? Well, your purse opened up and I got a waft. I was like, what?
Well, in England there's a comedy duo here called French and Saunders. Jennifer Saunders went on to do Absolutely Fabulous. That's her, which was written by Dawn French, but they're very famous here. And they did a piss take of Silence of the Lambs. And it was like Dawn French plays the Hannibal Lecter, and you got Jennifer Saunders there as Clarice standing. She keeps putting on this accent like, yes, shush, no shush. And that's all, yes, shush. But the funny thing about it is Dawn French goes, you use Clarins face cream and Right Guard deodorant, but not today.
I know what you did.
I was going to say what I noticed too is that they added in the book Hannibal never had that line of the famous line of he gets mad at Clarice and he's like, the last time someone talked to me like that is when I what is it, the Chianti first and then the fava bean? I get. Yeah. But that line was written for the movie because it was
Well, the reason being is because in the book is enemies, animals, something. It's another drink that they use. I can't remember. It begins with an A, Amones or something like that.
Absinthe?
No, it was absinthe. But the reason why they changed it to Chianti is because they didn't think the public was smart enough to know what the other one was, and they thought they would understand Chianti a lot easier.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But it was. It's a very good film, and I think that I think it's going to be one of those films. I mean, it's one of those rare Academy Award-winning films that basically is going to stand the test of times.
Academy Awards. It dominated the award shows. It was
director, screenwriter.
It's only one of only 3 films that have been able to win all those categories, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have to say that Thomas Harris, he's one of the only directors whose every book that he's written has become a movie. His first book was Black Sunday, then Manhunter, Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal, Red Dragon, remade from Manhunter.
I actually just picked up the Manhunter book too. I gotta read that as well.
Mm-hmm.
The movie's okay. The book is better.
I heard the movie's a little. It's difficult. It's hard to.
Which film?
Sit through.
Manhunter.
Manhunter's more on style, but and the Will. I think the Will Graham character is better in Manhunter than Ed Norton's portrayal of him and Red Dragon.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I do think Manhunter, Brian Cox's portrayal of Hannibal Lecter is far superior than Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
It's a lot more menacing. This is where, Brian Cox, no matter what he does, everything's just underneath. This is like everything's just, the menace is just underneath, and there's that scary thing that's just below the surface. That with Anthony Hopkins, everything's above the surface. It's right there.
Yeah, I know. He's phenomenal. I absolutely love him.
Definitely
a good movie to sit down with some popcorn and some pizza and just chill out and veg and watch it.
It's really a shame that they weren't able, that the other films couldn't really capitalize on Silence of the Lambs. I mean, I remember in Scream, isn't it Scream 2, they go, can you name a sequel that's better than the first film? And to be honest, Silence of the Lambs would probably fit in there. Because, Silence of the Lambs is a sequel in every single way. Okay, Manhunter didn't make the money.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the only times that the sequel was so much more successful that it's a sequel that was able to spawn a whole franchise. Because, in fact, Manhunter should have killed off the franchise because, it's a great film. It's great on style. But unfortunately it didn't make its money back. It didn't capture the audience the way Silence of the Lambs did. So.
Yeah. And it's also I think the era when it came out too, because it was not there yet. Right. So like that timing. Yeah.
There's a main character problem with Silence of the Lambs anyway. I know that she gets a bit of peace and stuff like this, but the problem basically is for Clarice, I think, is that innocents are forever going to be victimized, and Clarice will never run out of people she's going to need to save. There's always going to be criminals there. So, it'd be quite interesting to find out where the Clarice character. I know we have Hannibal there, but I'm sitting there saying a more generalized Clarice, where she goes as a character.
I definitely feel like in the movie, it's sort of like she's graduated and she's now going out into the big world. Look, I already got my own first case. Like she's very on her, like she's happy. But then it's when he calls, it's like, okay, back to work again, right? And she's, whereas in the novel, I think she still has to finish school. So I feel like it's an interesting thing that there's a gap there that she still has to finish school, and that's two different contexts, right? You're career oriented, you're student oriented. So it's depending on how they because they deviate from that. So how do you continue her story and fill in that gap,
Mm-hmm.
I do think that, there are portions in the book and the film where Clarice is actually hindered by her own drive for success. Because to be honest, if she paid attention to what Lecter was saying and not so intent on capturing Buffalo Bill, she probably would have put it together a lot sooner. But she wanted, she was just, she's just unable to, look at the evidence subjectively. Like, I think that, if the same evidence was given to her in the classroom and it was part of a homework assignment, and it was, I think that she probably would have solved the crime a lot faster, but because she wanted Hannibal to keep telling her everything, pretty much walk her by the hand. I mean, of course, Hannibal doesn't do that, which kind of becomes a bit of a problem for Clarice later on,
It's interesting in the film, too, because I noticed this, too, that her roommate is the one who actually helps her solve it. And I was like, I don't like that. Like, I actually like the book that she figures it out. Because her roommate's like, well, what does that mean? Oh, it means that he coveted. What does he covet? And they're sitting there, like, talking it out. I'm like, who are you? When did you just come in here? And the two of them figure it out together. Oh, girl, you got it. Yeah. Whereas the book, she figures it out, and it's kind of like a redeeming quality for her, because I would say she definitely had a stronger hero's journey where she is put on this mission to do this, go interview, then go commit to the crime scene, then go. And she's trying to follow everything by the book, and then her anger gets her in trouble, and then she gets sent home, and now they're going to go off, and then she continues on this path of, I'm sacrificing school, but you know what, I have to stay on this goal of trying to apprehend this person. I think she's just trying to follow, in the book, she's trying to follow the rules. Like, she's trying to follow the rules and do the right thing, whereas in the movie she's more spontaneous enough to the fact where, like we said, she throws herself against a glass and she's breaking kind of rules there in order to get the information from Hannibal, but it's right there in front of her. Like, if she just slows it down and she analyzes it as an agent, she'll figure it out. She's so desperate, to me, in the movie that it puts herself in jeopardy in some ways.
I also kind of wonder about the Hector character, actually. A little Hector character. Hector. Lecter. I always, when I watched the film and read the book recently, when she comes out with, like, if you give us this information, you'll have a room with a view and you'll be able to walk, around this.
The lie, yeah.
Yeah, the lie. Do you think he really believe? I mean, does he really believe it that he's actually going to get that, or because in the book it kind of gives you to the view that he's, he does. There's some gullibility there that he is going to believe it, but in the film, watching it again, I find that Hannibal Lecter kind of looks at her like, yeah, okay, yeah, well, really, there's kind of that look in his face that you're not quite sure if he believes it or he doesn't believe it, but you're not really sure.
It's interesting because that was one of the silences because I kind of highlighted that because she tells him this whole thing like, oh, we're going to do this and this. And his response is in silence. And it basically like silence is our enemy or something. So it's basically like, and she keeps going, well, but then you're going to get this too. And you're going to like, so I don't think in the book, he definitely doesn't believe her. He's just letting her ramble on to be like, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to give you this. And he's just sitting there very rapport, like, okay, sure, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite interesting. That scene always kind of wondering, like, was he that gullible? Do you really think that was going to happen? Or, I mean, because the thing is, she does go pretty thick with it, and the Taurans will be out there, like.
Oh, it's the line is silence can mock. So she gives this whole spiel to him, and his response, she glances up. His response is silent can mock. And then she goes on, well, the best thing, the remarkable thing is 1 week, a year, you'll be able to leave the hospital and go here. She puts
with SWAT snipers, of course.
Yeah, and Dr. Lecter does not pull it through. So she puts it in the drawer. And he just kind of is like, in the movie, remember, she kind of puts it all in there and she goes, this is your final offer. And she shoves it to him and he kind of peers in and looks at it, and she, so I think in the movie, maybe he's like, oh, you don't want to play a game? Okay, we'll play the game. Fine.
Yeah.
In the book, I think he's smarter. He's more meticulous in a way to be like, sure, you're giving me this. We'll see about that,
I think it's I mean, the Dr. Chilton character also is, he's a bit different. I mean, the smarminess is still there, but I have to say the actor who plays him in the film really captured that smarm.
Spot on. Like he just had that wormy. Ugh.
And I have to say, I'd say for a film, I think this film is very well cast all the way around. I mean, as I said before, I mean, I think Hopkins does a fantastic job in the film. But because I've seen other people play it, I see it differently now and sort of thing. But I think, he did a fantastic job, and I can't really say there's a real weak link within the whole film.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't realize the one that is that ends up being the daughter of the senator, that she's been in a lot of stuff too before. So that's what's so weird when you see actors that you haven't seen in so long. You're like, oh my God, she was in Grey's Anatomy, and I'm like, oh wait.
I actually noticed that too. I was like, holy crap.
Isn't that weird when you watch a movie and you realize later, you're like, wait, they were in that,
I do have to sit there and say though, I think kudos needs to go to Scott Glenn as Jack Crawford.
Yeah.
I think, he's one of those weird actors that appears in a lot of stuff, but I have to sit there and say in here, he doesn't say much, but he really was able to give his co-character like a whole storyline just by being there. He had that fatherly approach.
They could have gave him so many more lines to that character, but I feel like they realized he didn't need it. Like it was meant to be more for her, like for Foster to be able to build that character that way.
Yeah. Well, I think as I said before, I do think it's like a father figure to her. I mean, the film, it comes across as more, he's the father figure that she always wanted, because he's like the father. I mean, you don't really picture. You get a glimpse of the father coming out of the police car, and then the story. But it's almost like he's, she looks up to him like a father. It's like she's pleasing, trying to please her dad, make her dad proud, but at the same time she's making Jack Crawford proud.
But then what's interesting is like how Hannibal kind of warps that. Because he sees it as like, oh, does he want to fuck you? And he makes these comments to her, and she's like, no. Yeah. But you kind of wonder, because there are moments I think in the book you see like he wanted to hug her right at the end, but he is like realized, well, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna just keep my distance, and he leaves her with some sort of parting wisdom that like it was basically like your father would be proud of you or something like that.
Well, I think that, unfortunately, I think when you're stuck in that kind of role, you do have a professionalism you have to keep. And, I'm not sure if this is what the script wanted or anything like that, but, she does get singled out of all of her whole class. And from what I understand with the FBI, your class is probably about 200 to 300 people per class per year, sort of something, or it might be more than that. But I think I read somewhere that,
and probably predominantly male, right?
Predominantly male. She gets singled out. Well, it is predominantly male because the only other female classmate you see is her flatmate. You don't see other female students at all.
That's what made me laugh, because that movie, aside from the senator and her daughter and her friend, it's like they're the really strong only other females in there, because it's like she's surrounded constantly by men and like 15 men. Sometimes you're just like, what is going on in these scenes,
And it's very male oriented, and I think that so she gets singled out. And I think that if he did give her a hug, could you imagine what her other classmates would think? Oh, and she's the favorite. She's sleeping with him and all this other stuff.
And in the book too, though, it is we had mentioned before, it's a predominant scene for Crawford that he has a dying wife, and so it could also insinuate that we know your wife is dying and she's been dying for a while, so you probably haven't been having sex with anyone. So it would just be normal for you to obviously go and pick a young, beautiful woman to
Right.
Well, men are, what they say that, so your wife's dying or something like this, that, you always get these stories that the man has found comfort in the nurse or found comfort in another woman. Whereas the other way around, if the man's dying, the woman's just sitting next to the bed, coping with it, where the man just needs someone. I think there's a class. By the way,
her dying was so sad, because it was like, it was sad, but it was also beautiful, because he kind of one of the lines or something like he didn't cry because he's already done that, and it's just like that just is heartbreaking, because I think anyone who knows that when someone's really ill and they've been a long time dying, the level of mortality in that, and him when it happens, it's kind of everyone is grieving with him. So everyone is, I think they're going to make a donation to a foundation to him. It's like that piece of that story, I think I kind of wish they did incorporate it in there, but I know it's, again, one of those things is it needed in the story, really, not really in the movie. So it's like, we can take that out, but I think it builds a lot for that character, and you have sympathy for that character in that way after when it happens. And like, you want him to be happy,
Well, another thing that the book had his chauffeur pull, on the side. So when Jack Crawford comes out, he gets angry, and the chauffeur does that on purpose, so that way he can be angry with him.
Yeah, that's right.
Can yell at him, and it's like, that was such a good little sequence in the book. It's like, oh,
yeah, I like that too. Though it's funny because then remember they had the chauffeur, that little guy who was at the storage place, and she's like, "Can he help us?" And he's like, "Oh, he doesn't like lifting things or something." She's like, "Oh, okay, whatever." So I kind of feel like they passed that trait on to him, maybe, which is kind of cute. That there's this kind of like, no, he's not that type of guy.
And I do think that. Yeah, that show. I mean, I sit there saying in the book, I was really touched by the whole chauffeur thing, and the way the chauffeur treats him, and the way the chauffeur takes care of Jack Crawford. I mean, he takes care of him, and then anytime that Jack Crawford's a bit short, he'll go to Clarice. Is like, well, da 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 da, and those scenes are really well put together. And I have to sit there and say that Thomas Harris did a fantastic job with that.
Yeah. And Barney, I love Barney. Like, Barney was just like, again, he was such a great character. And even when Hannibal was handed off and she was asking him, like, do you think they're going to listen to you? And he's like, well, I hope they do. And he just kind of is like, you're a good woman. Like, I love that. He didn't need to say that. He could have just been like, yay, finally this shit's done. I never have to deal with this guy.
See you later.
This wacko. He actually is generally concerned, I don't know for Hannibal or if he's more concerned for people dealing with Hannibal, and like, but he wants to make sure it's the situation is handled properly. And for her, he just says like, thank you for doing what you're doing.
The interesting thing about Barney character, he just popped back up in Hannibal, not the TV series, but the actual book. And, and he pops up in the movie as well. I think Clarice goes to him later on in the book outside, and he's still working there. And
it's interesting because if all people would know him really the best, you would think it would be Chillington, but it's not. It's actually, it's him because he spent years with him,
I do think it would have been, I think the film, one thing I do regret that they missed out in the film, it would have been great if they had that one scene where, like they do in the book, that Dr. Chilton's not a real doctor.
Oh yeah,
that would have been fantastic if they actually put that in the film. Yeah.
I would have liked the ending of the book. I mean, the film to be like the book in the sense where it's literally Lecter sitting in a hotel and writing these letters and writing them out, and then like having someone come pick the letters up and have it be like, oh, thank you so much, Mr. Chilton. Would you need anything else? And you realize, oh crap, he's pretending to be him.
Yeah.
And you don't know what happened to him. Like, did he kill him or is he just waiting for him? Like, that would have been a very interesting twist to the end of that movie. Mm-hmm. And then having them get those letters and having it be kind of like back and forth where he's writing the letters and then they're reading the letters going, oh shit, here's what's going on here.
Well, I mean, the film does have that. Yeah, it does remind me that this thing is great. We're always got to have a sequel. It's like it's built up for a sequel. It's almost like we're making this movie and we're gonna be so successful. We need to make sure we have a opening here for a sequel.
Yeah, and we missed that. The last line is like basically the silence of the lambs, which is what that her trying to be able to sleep at night and have that
Well, I mean, the book begins and ends with Clarice. The movie begins with Clarice and ends with Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
And
him walking away
And so now what you have...
Unless you hear her in the background, Dr. Lecter, Dr. Lecter, Dr. Lecter. Like he hung up. He's hung up. What are you doing?
Not here.
Anyway, which is kind of interesting because you have a film that, well, you have a book that's basically about Clarice Starling's finding her path to the career that she wants. And in the book, and it goes from beginning to end, very tight and clean, and she finds the resolution that she wants. In the movie, you got Clarice, and then what you end up with is the story of Hannibal. You know what I mean? It's kind of, you go on this journey with Clarice, and by the end of the film, it's just basically the film became all of a sudden within that last scene, the film is Hannibal's movie, which is kind of bizarre when you think about it, because I think that even today, after I watched the film last night, thinking about it, I still think of it as a Hannibal Lecter movie. I don't think of it as Clarice Starling movie. It's still Hannibal Lecter. Yeah. Which is
because he drives it all. He drives the whole thing from beginning to end.
Yeah, but in the book, I didn't actually feel that way. I didn't feel like a Hannibal Lecter book. It felt like a woman's journey, going from point A to point B, solving a bunch of murders, and finding some kind of peace at the end of it all.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing how said before, 20 maybe 30 minutes on. I don't even think it's more than 20 minutes. I think if you took all the times that Anthony Hopkins is on screen, I think it only totals about 20-25 minutes at the most out of a 2-hour plus movie, which isn't much when the whole film is pretty much taken over by him, really.
Yeah. Waiting for his next step in order to move the story along.
I'm just waiting for Jodie Foster.
I think in the book too is like when you think about it, she only goes to him when she's stuck. Like she's figuring things out, and she's laying out the pieces of things, and she's figuring out how things work. And then when she doesn't get the answers, it's not even her going back; it's Crawford saying, "Go back to Lecter." She's like, "Okay, I gotta go back to Lecter." And she'll go back to Lecter and be like, "Here's what I figured out." And it's almost like, "Here's a piece of my flesh. Here now, give me some more information. Here's another piece of my flesh. Now here's some more information."
Yeah. You gotta give a little to take. You gotta take. What is it? Give a little to take a little.
Take a little.
So do we have any other things that we'd like to add about the movie and the film and everything like that?
Other than it's a must-see, no.
I just love that it was all about, like, to me, the main theme was transformation. So you got to see the transformation of these characters. We got to see the transformation from book to film. So if you haven't read the book, read the book. If you haven't watched the film, watch the film. Do both, preferably. But, yeah.
Okay.
And my final take on it is, I think both of them are excellent. I think, I think if you read the book and see the film, I think that you'll get so much more out of the film from reading the book, and I think you'll get so much out of watching the film and get so much more out of the book. I think that they really feed off each other very, very well. I think it's one of those. I think it's one of those weird instances where both of them are superior.
Yeah, I agree.
It's definitely both book and movie. You won't be disappointed with those.
Yeah.
At all.
And it started off a franchise, and it started off a whole new genre of film called crime horror.
Yeah, true.
So, which, as I said before, there's been plenty of authors, and there's new movies coming out all the time fitting in that, with The Snowman coming out next month.
I'm really excited for that one because that looks really good. Off the same vein of this, so, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, looking at the trailer, it kind of reminds me a little bit of Insomnia.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I think it's because of all the snow. And
so it's interesting because I didn't care so much for the movie, but I did like the book for Insomnia.
I didn't read the book. I saw the film, and the only thing I know, Robin Williams is a comedy genius, but he used to always irritate me. And I think that when he played serial killers, like in 1 Hour Photo and Insomnia, I think he was really, really effective. I think he did. I would love to see no more in those kind of roles, but that's
because you just didn't expect that type of character, and I think I don't. Out of him, I was talking to someone else about the whole the guy from Third Rock from the Sun and how
John Lithgow.
Yes, about him playing that character in Dexter. Oh God, like he was just such a crazy character, but you didn't expect that. He's sort of like this lovely, lighthearted person playing Gray.
Well, have you ever seen early Brian De Palma films? Like Obsession. And, John Lithgow started off as the heavy villain.
Oh, funny! I never saw any of those. So
I don't know.
I've known him like the lighthearted, Third Rock from the Sun,
Dad,
Harry and the Henderson. Wait, no, he wasn't. Was he in Harry?
Yes, he was. Yeah. Wait,
so like that lighthearted
dad.
Yeah.
I mean, you should, if you like John Lithgow, check out Obsession, which he's very good in that. He's also in another Brian De Palma, Raising Cain. Which is very good, about a man with multiple personalities, and he plays that fantastically well.
Wow, nice.
So,
and now he's in Daddy's Home 2. Yeah, he is.
Well, I mean, we at the end of the next year we cover John Lithgow. One of his, he plays a transsexual in The World According to Garp.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
So he's very good in that as well, and he's brilliant in that film. So, like I said, brings us in. Well, just let you know that we have a competition. If you want to leave a message or give us a like on Facebook, which is www.facebook.com/literary license podcast, or you can follow us on Twitter on www.twitter.com/lit-pod. or it might be a lot easier. Or you might be a lot easier. Just go to our homepage, which is www.mbliterary. Excuse me. Let me start over. That's www.mbliterary.com, and you can just click on the Literary License Podcast, and you can leave us a message on there or give us a like. The first 3 people that we pull out of the hat will be eligible to win. 2 of them will be able to win a T-shirt, a special Buffalo Bill T-shirt that we're giving away. And you can also win the Blu-ray box set of the Hannibal quadrilogy, which will include Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal, and Hannibal Rising. So this is Keith Shago saying goodnight, and
this is Mandy saying see you later.
And this is John Wilson. Until then, keep the skin tight, and thank you for listening.
You know what you look like to me with your good bag and your cheap shoes? You look like a rube. A well-scrubbed, hustling rube with a little taste. Good nutrition's given you some length of bone, but you're not more than 1 generation from poor wire trash, are you, Agent Starling? And that accent you've tried so desperately to shed, pure West Virginia. What does your father do? Is he a coal miner? Does he stink of the land? You know how quickly the boys found you, all those tedious, sticky fumblings in the backseats of cars, while you could only dream of getting out, getting anywhere, getting all the way to the Applebee line.
You see a lot, Doctor?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Me and my best friends went looking for something to see, and down in the basement we found a replacement for prom and for late night TV, with half the room sleeping and half the room keeping far away from
a race. Have the lambs stopped screaming?
Now some years later, my path gets no straighter, but you dig your way deeper each time. Like the other day, I heard the newspaper say there was a fugitive eluding his crime. Pursued through their states, making narrow escapes and fooling all those who stood in his way. And it took me a minute before I'd admit it. I was hoping he would get away. Hannibal Lecter, twisted and so polite, better than he must be. Yeah, I cheer for the bad guy from the beginning. What does that say about me? It's one thing to smile at you and celluloid, another to endorse it for real. But what can I say? It's complicated. I'm afraid of how you make me feel. Hannibal Lecter, brilliant and dignified, more real than fiction should be. I was rooting for you from the beginning. What does that say about me? It's one thing to get at her through the glass, another to get under my skin. But what can I say? I'm fascinated. After lunch, then the game can begin.
I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner.